They lurk in corners, just beyond the edge of light. No eyes, no face, only the shape of something watching. They visit when you're most vulnerable, paralyzed in your bed, unable to scream. Are they spirits, interdimensional travelers, or something far more sinister? Tonight, we step into the darkness to uncover the truth behind the watchers in the shadows. This is Project Black Garden, a Monsters and Myths podcast. Season 2, The Snapdragon Files. Episode 20. Case number 171. Shadow People. So lock your doors, dim the lights, turn the volume all the way up, and whatever you do, don't look behind you. The mythology and history of shadow people spans cultures, centuries, and supernatural theories. These entities are typically described as dark, shadow-like humanoid figures that appear on the edges of vision, often vanishing when looked at directly. They're tied to sleep paralysis, haunted locations, and folklore. In Middle Eastern and Islamic lore, the jinn, shape-shifting spirits made of smokeless fire, share similarities with the shadow people in behavior and intent. In European folklore, tales of dark apparitions, night hags, and black spirits haunting bedrooms date back to the Middle Ages. These figures were often associated with oppression in sleep and omens of death. In Native American traditions, some tribes speak of shadow beings as spirit walkers, souls caught between the worlds, or beings from the spirit realm observing humans. The modern phenomenon of the shadow people myth exploded in modern culture in the early 2000s. A fellow gardener, Art Bell, and his Coast to Coast AM paranormal radio show featured thousands of callers sharing eerily similar encounters and shadowy entities. And they all described the same description. And typically, they all described what they saw as tall, human-shaped silhouettes, sometimes wearing wide-brimmed hats or cloaks, having no discernible features, emitting a feeling of fear, dread, or paralysis, sometimes formless, like black smoke. This has caused different interpretations of shadow people. Some believe shadow people are travelers from other realities, bleeding into ours briefly, interdimensional beings. Some see them as demons or malevolent spirits. In many religions' interpretations, they are viewed as demonic observers or harbingers of danger. They are said to also be astral entities. Those who practice astral projection often describe seeing shadowy figures during out-of-body experiences, possibly other astral travelers or guardians of the veil. Modern-day science has tried to find explanations, such as sleep paralysis, a condition where the mind wakes before the body, often accompanied by hallucinations. Shadow people are a common vision. Pareidolia The brain's tendency to see patterns, especially faces or figures, in shadows and darkness. Hypnagogic hallucinations, visual distortions that occur in the moments between wakefulness and sleep. One of the most famous and detailed shadow people is the Hat Man, a distinct type of shadow person, often described wearing a fedora or brimmed hat. He stands out for being observed in full wakefulness, not just in sleep paralysis, often watching silently, evoking intense dread. Reports around the world with near identical features. And his very own file was addressed in Season 1, The Oleander Files. But as most urban legends go, the internet helped evolve the lore of shadow people, blending the myth with other creatures like Slender Man and the Hat Man. Now, my great uncle Sam and his secret special ops unit, Team 7734, seemed to encounter many variations of shadow people. All of them well documented, and each one as confusing and mysterious as the last. None more so than the file I'm about to read to you. When my great uncle and his team seemed to be chasing down impossible stories that seemed to end with some version of a shadowy bad omen, up until it directly caught up with them. And when I'm finished, I'll tell you about my experience with shadow people. But first, my great uncle Samuel and his team were tasked to figure out a string of events that seemed to be triggered by the sightings of dark figures just before or just after a chaotic or deadly event. This paranormal chase started with a fire in Vermont, in a small town nestled among Vermont's dense pines. The local librarian began noticing dark silhouettes standing across the street from her house each night. They never moved, never approached, just stood, featureless and still under the pale glow of the streetlight. Though she didn't believe in these phantoms, they seemed to believe in her. 3 days later, a gas leak ignited in the library's basement. The resulting explosion reduced the 100-year-old building to splinters and ash. The librarian survived only because she'd forgotten her keys and gone home early. The town mourned the loss of 3 teenagers studying in the reading nook that afternoon. As my great uncle Sam and his team surveyed the area just after the horrible explosion, they were dumbfounded and confused, while locals whispered that the shadowy watchers had been an omen, a silent warning, or perhaps a sinister catalyst. My great uncle Sam noted it in his files, and they quickly moved on to another call in Mississippi. A week later, in the city of Natchez, a truck driver named Harold reported seeing a line of black, human-shaped voids standing along the shoulder of the U.S. Route 84. as he drove over the river bridge. They were all different sizes, and their presence startled him so badly he swerved, almost crashing. He nearly called the police, thinking it was some macabre prank. But instead, he steadied himself and continued driving. 2 nights afterward, a barge struck the bridge supports. Concrete crumbled. Vehicles plunged into the muddy river below. Dozens died, and Harold found himself haunted by the idea that he had been given a glimpse, an awful, cryptic glimpse of what was to come. Harold would later commit suicide because he couldn't live with the horrifying thoughts. With no physical evidence to support his claims, my uncle and Team 7734 started another journey, which landed them in Kansas, in a quiet farming town just outside of Topeka. A young mother named Clara watched her children play in the yard. When she glanced up, she froze. 3 dark figures stood in the wheat, impossibly tall and still, their outlines shimmering in the afternoon haze. She rubbed her eyes and blinked, thinking she was seeing things. And then the shadows darted back and forth before coming to a standstill just out of reach. She screamed for her children and ran inside. Moments later, a tornado siren wailed. A devastating twister ripped through her neighborhood, destroying nearly every home. Her family survived by huddling in the cellar, but their world was reduced to splinters above them. Inside that cellar, she quaked with fear and prayed that the shadows had moved on. When Clara finally found the strength and dared to peek outside, the figures were gone and the skies were blue. She began to weep when my uncle and his team pulled up to try to help. Growing more frustrated, Uncle Sam was getting tired of chasing ghosts and stories, only to be led into the next awful tragedy. He was also frustrated that the news of these apparitions never reached the broader public. In the towns, it was all anybody would talk about. But nationwide, everybody just saw it as another tragedy. Most of the experiences were dismissed by authorities as grief-induced hallucinations. But in classified circles, analysts began connecting the reports, and Team 7734 was dispatched once again under the Defense Intelligence Agency's Paranormal Threats Division. According to my uncle, their mission: track the pattern, predict the next tragedy, and learn what these shadow people were. As impossible as that sounded, he tried his best. They continued and followed a trail of sightings, small towns in Ohio, a coastal hotel in Oregon, a remote Navajo reservation in New Mexico. Each time disaster struck, hours or days later, chemical spills, earthquakes, mysterious fires. The tragedies seemed random, but they all had one thing in common. Finally, in a wooded training site outside Fort Lewis, Washington, Team Hell set up thermal and spectral imaging arrays after locals reported shadows pacing and running through the tree lines. As the team swept the forest at night, the cameras failed one by one, screens filling with static. Through night vision goggles, they began to see dozens of shapes, far more than ever reported. And before they knew what was happening, the shadows closed in silently from all sides and directions. Uncle Sam said all he remembered was gunfire erupted everywhere. His team, known for keeping their cool and handling any situation, seemed to freak out as the bullets passed through empty air. One soldier screamed over the comms about cold hands clutching his throat, blackness swallowing his vision. By dawn, only 2 members stumbled back to the staging area. My uncle and his best friend and his teammate, Bowie. Bowie was rambling about how the shadows weren't watchers at all, but heralds, drawn to the scent of death like moths to the flame. My Uncle Sam tried to calm him down, but he was too far gone. But my uncle kept trying. And just when he thought he had got through and started to calm Bowie down, they heard the first hints of a helicopter ferrying in reinforcements. And just as a small smile crept up on my great uncle's face, something malfunctioned in the helicopter. Its lights flickered. Smoke began to billow from its engine. It spun out and crashed into the forest above, immediately igniting a wildfire that consumed everything for miles. It took everything the 2 soldiers had to make it out that night, and when they made it back to base, they were told that Team 7734's official report shall remain sealed, and it was, for many years, stamped with a blood-red ink blotch that read Project Black Garden. But my uncle knew the truth, that these shadows still roam America's quiet roads, standing in fields and at lonely intersections, watching, waiting, and wherever they linger too long, tragedy always follows. My great Uncle Sam finishes his report with, "Some people believe they are omens. Others believe they are the cause. I have seen both. Either way, if you ever glimpse a figure darker than the night itself, you best pray it moves on." Now, shadow people, due to the fact that they seem to come in all different forms, as mentioned before, the Hat Man, Slender Man, some even say Mothman, but I base it on the fact that I've seen them. I was 16, living it up with my friends in the mountains above my childhood city, a stomping ground they used to call the Wallapies. Now, these mountains were found in the northern Arizona desert, and when me and my friends had nothing better to do, that's where we'd end up on a cool evening in the fall. Well, one of these evenings, we had decided to stay the night. We didn't have camping gear. All we had were our cars, jackets, and sleeping bags, while we listened to music, told stupid jokes, and bragged about our latest crushes. The forest fell. Quiet. Too quiet. I was the only one to notice it at first. But quickly, our small group began to search the area. And what did we find? Nothing except shadows. Now, some still say that they were just the shadows of the trees, but I know what I saw. I saw at least a dozen figures, all shapes and sizes, lined up along the ridge of the mountain, a stone's throw away from us. Now, they didn't move, but if I blinked or turned my head when I focused my eyes back on the same spot, they wouldn't be there anymore. And for a split second, I thought I might be seeing things, until from the corner of my eye, I would find them again, just a little ways from where they were before. Now, they all looked like the same shadows, but they were in different positions. This happened over and over again, and with each reappearance, they seemed to get closer to our makeshift camp. And finally, when I felt they had gotten too close, I looked at my friends, got in my car, and drove away without saying a word. I just turned up the radio, blaring the newest rock anthem, and drove home. The following days in school, we never talked about what we saw, but one of my friends seemed to be haunted by the experience. I lost touch with him after we graduated, but last I heard, he developed quite the drug problem, and no one has seen him in 10 years. Anyways, fellow gardeners, if any of you out there has witnessed or experienced the shadow people, please contact me. Tell me your story. I would love to share it with the rest of our listeners. As always, you can reach me at pbgharvest@gmail.com. This has been Project Black Garden, a Monsters and Myths podcast, Season 2, The Snapdragon File. I hope you'll come back, for the next file is an impossible one, and people still argue to this day if they are real. Be here next time as we tackle the myth of giants. I'm your host, Michael, and remember, monsters are real. And sometimes, with that truth comes tragedy.